I am Dustin Baker, and this is VikesNow. This is the Friday. Welcome to July edition. And with the start of a new month, I want to take this midsummer opportunity to document verbally and on video all of the stuff in the Vikings rumor mill. The evidence tells me at VikingsTerritory.com that you folks enjoy rumors. So, via traffic, those are always the biggest articles of what rumors are flying around. So, what I do each weekend is plop all of them in a couple Vikings territory articles. So this is going to be a video recap of all of the ones that are semi-interesting, realistic, noteworthy from the last probably 2 weeks or so. And you guys are like the Coppin and Glorious Bastards that loves rumors, right? We'll get to that. We'll see. If you don't, holler at me, put it in the comments, and we'll shift course and go back to some other tangible items. So I got about seven things that are in the mix. Of course, not all of them will come to fruition. Maybe none of them will, but I'm going to document them for the group. The first came from Pro Football Focus, and this was earlier this week, talking about every transaction, a free agent, or a trade every team should make. And interestingly, PFF nominated A.J. Johnson, Alexander Johnson, an off-ball linebacker from the Denver Broncos last year to join in free agency the Vikings this year. And there's one primary reason. That's because Ed Donatel is now the Vikings defensive coordinator, and he was Johnson's coach for a couple years with the Broncos. So here's the deal on Alexander Johnson. He should be affordable. Why? Well, he only played 6 games last year before he was injured in October and got put on injured reserve. However, in those first 6 games, he had enough defensive snaps to qualify for PFF's leaderboard for all off-ball linebackers. And quietly, he was the third best off-ball linebacker in all of the land, and he's still a free agent. So that leads me to believe that the injury is a little spooky for some general managers. But if it's not and he returns to health, I guess in theory, he would fit on the Vikings if he would accept a reservist role. For now, the Vikings have Eric Kendricks and Jordan Hicks, a free agent, to start in the off-ball spot in this new 3-4 scheme. But there's always a chance that something happens to one of those men, and the next man up right now would be Brian Asamoah, a rookie from Oklahoma. Or they could hedge that bet if Asamoah is no good, which is a real possibility. We don't know. Stranger things have happened. Then Johnson could be the next man up. And I think that one is worth a look because the guy's PFF grade was 80.9 for God's sake, and that shit doesn't grow on trees. So number one, Alexander Johnson. You can call him A.J. Johnson. The next is something I've talked about on this show just in passing is Eric Ebron. So this feels like about the 5th time I've mentioned this very sentence. The Vikings at TE2 are skimpy. They are banking a lot on Irv Smith Jr., which is fine and dandy because he deserves a shitload of targets. However, after Irv Smith, it is Ben Ellefson, Johnny Munt, Zach Davidson, and Nick Muse. Not very inspirational if something happens to Irv Smith Jr. once again. Conversely, Eric Ebron, he was a monster 4 years ago in 2018. I think I mentioned last time he scored 13 touchdowns in the Colts offense. I believe that was Andrew Luck's swan song season. Didn't come back after that. Ebron then ventured to the Steelers. Did okay. But he could realistically, he's got that first round draft stock from the Lions back, 8 years ago? He needs to sign somewhere. He's good enough to play in this league, and he really does make sense if the Vikings don't want Kyle Rudolph, who I'll touch on in about 5 minutes as part of the rumor mill. Eric Ebron is athletic, a scorer of touchdowns, and he would be pretty trustworthy if something happened to Irv Smith, as opposed to pivoting to Johnny Munt. And, Johnny Munt probably won't emulate Tyler Conklin if Smith Jr. misses time, but Eric Ebron could. Not quite like Chris Herndon, who was traded for and not used with a fancy 4th-round draft pick. Ebron would be available for cheap and could shore up the Vikings' tight end depth, which they haven't done. Who was it I was talking to? I think it was Josh Fry 2 episodes ago that talked about Ham potentially being used as a tight end, and maybe that, not exclusively, but used in sets as a tight end, and perhaps that's why Minnesota isn't doing too much at TE2. We shall see at training camp and beyond. Alexander Johnson, Eric Ebron. The next one is Ndamukong Suh, who I did a whole show on, so I'll breeze through this one. This is another one that showed up out of nowhere, and this one was more than just Bleacher Report thinks or PFF thinks. This one was from a credible source, Tyler Dragon from USA Today, who said that the Vikings and the Raiders would be the logical landing spots and that the Vikings had already talked to Sue. Now, you bring in Sue if you're swinging for the fences and you want to get to a Super Bowl. His campaign last year was no good, 49 point something Pro Football Focus grade. So this season, wherever he ends up, will determine if that was an outlier or his age-related decline has begun. But for the reasons that I mentioned in the episode last week about Sue, he is a big name that will sell some jerseys, and he's reliable. Suddenly you'd be looking at a defense that has Za'Darius Smith, Danielle Hunter, Ndamukong Suh, Eric Kendricks, Harrison Smith, Patrick Peterson, and you're like, wow, you can't go wrong with that. At least that would be what was on the billboard, so to speak, because you have these big-name dudes. Suh's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. He got that Super Bowl ring with the Bucs. But he will stay in the rumor mill until he signs with the Raiders elsewhere or with the Vikings. He's indicated he does want to play, so I don't think retirement is an option. A.J. Johnson, Eric Ebron, and Ndamukong Suh all in the rumor mill. The next one is not as spicy because I think folks realize that it was preposterous, is Baker Mayfield. Now, in the last week, sources have said that he will probably be traded for by the Seattle Seahawks, and they'll say the hell with the Drew Lock era, we're going with Baker Mayfield, which adds up because no matter how you feel about Mayfield, he deserves to start in the league. He played through injury, screwed the pooch, doesn't have Brett Favre's genes to play hurt, and he looked like an idiot last year. But if he's healthy, he dragged the Browns to a playoff game for the first time since 1994, and he really deserves to play somewhere, whether that is the Panthers or a quarterback-needy team like these Seahawks. But the important part for the purposes of this show is that he shouldn't be in the Vikings rumor mill. If Vikings go 7-9 or 8-9 again, and they said we're done with Cousins, we're trading him to the Texans or some shit like that, then you can reasonably explore Baker Mayfield in free agency and not have to give up draft capital or anything of the like and sign him to a prove-it deal and then draft your quarterback of the future if the Cousins era flames out with O'Connell. But the important part of the Baker Mayfield to Seattle chatter is that the Vikings name isn't involved in it. And there was some local Minneapolis media entities that just ran hog wild with the Baker Mayfield stuff. And I tried to use our platform, Vikings territory, to explain why it's not real sensible. All right. A.J. Johnson, Eric Ebron, and Ndamukong Suh, Baker Mayfield. A couple more. Kyle Rudolph did an episode on that one. The only reason that he's in the Vikings rumor mill is because he wanted to be in it. He told Paul Allen on KFan that he would love to return to the team, and nothing has happened since. But if the one side says he'd like to do it, the other side needs a second tight end, there is room for a merger there. So if you're a Rudolph fan, I still think it's a tangible possibility that they bring him back to finish out his career, or at least for 2022 as the TE2. But the distinguishing factor there is that he wouldn't come back to get the lion's share of targets like he had in that Sam Bradford offense 6 years ago now when he had like 100-something targets. Crazy. But Rudolph indicated that he wants to be with the Vikings. He said it came out of his lips to Paul Allen. And if the Vikings are in the market for a TE2, they know this guy. He played for them for a decade. Winding down the show, we have J.C. Tretter. Now, I think from the moment that he was released, one of the best pass-blocking centers on the planet, it's been the fascination that he would land with Minnesota. I even tweeted, and I don't ask for... how you get on social media and every player that's released, well, the Vikings should sign him. I'm not like that because I know that the chances of the Vikings signing any of these guys is low because there's 31 other options. But with Tretter, he just like the TE2 stuff, the Vikings have a need at center unless Garrett Bradbury is completely rejuvenated, some marvel of nature. He's good now. The Vikings have a need at center and have had one for quite some time. Because Kwesi Adofo-Mensah last worked with the Browns, which is who cut Tretter, this adds up. It really, really does. And the longer Tretter stays on the free agent wire, the more affordable he becomes, in my opinion. Now there's some noise about whether or not he's healthy because he never practices. He only plays on game days. I don't care. he played fine with that little strategy last year and however long it's been lasting. So it would be a certifiable fix beyond the shadow of a doubt that if Tretter signed with the Vikings, the center position would be fine, so long as he doesn't get hurt. He's better than Bradbury. He's better than most. And his modus operandi is pass protection. And if the Vikings could solve the middle of the offensive line with that, with Tretter, once and for all, I think Kirk Cousins would benefit, and you'd see a version of Kirk that you were like, wow, this guy is pretty damn good after all. So Tretter, and this drum has been beat to death for 3.5 months. I don't know if it'll happen. I wrote on Vikings territory today or yesterday or today that only reason this Tretter stuff will stop is if he retires, signs with the Vikings, or signs elsewhere, because he makes too much sense for the 2022 Vikings. And finally, not necessarily a Vikings rumor, but still important nonetheless, is Anthony Barr. He got nominated for Muhammad Ali Humanitarian ESPY Award. The Vikings tweeted it, and I was like, are they claiming here or what? But they also mentioned Karl Anthony Towns in the tweet, so they're just doing the Minnesota thing. But Barr continues to be linked to the Dallas Cowboys as a landing spot if he is indeed healthy. You'll recall I had Ben Lieber on this show when the show was just getting off the ground, and he questioned whether or not Barr can still even play with I think it was a bum knee or something like that. We saw last year that Barr played pretty damn well. 3 interceptions, 60-something PFF grade. And so far in this offseason rumor mill, he's been linked to these Cowboys, New York Jets for a minute. I think the Cardinals have nibbled at whispers in the rumor mill. So if Barr does sign somewhere based on all of the appetite, I think it would be the Dallas Cowboys because he wouldn't necessarily start over Micah Parsons or Leighton Vander Esch, but he would give them depth. That's the rumor mill through July 1st. I will be back on probably Monday night, which could be Tuesday morning for you guys. We shall see. But have an enjoyable 4th of July weekend. And Skol, baby.